My boyfriend cheated on me and told everyone it was my fault. I was sitting across from my boyfriend at dinner, listening as he calmly explained why his cheating was my fault. He leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk I once found charming, now twisted into something cruel. "You know why this happened, Lily," he said, twirling his pasta. "You've been so distant lately, so cold. I mean, what did you expect?" This was the same man who used to tell me I was his everything. Now he was sitting there, cool as ice, making his betrayal sound like basic cause and effect. "I gave you so many chances," he continued. "Remember when I tried to plan that weekend getaway last month? You said you were too busy with work. And then there was your sister's wedding. You barely talked to me the whole night." Each example felt like another nail in the coffin of my self-worth. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that work had been overwhelming, that at the wedding I'd been stressed about family drama, but the words stuck in my throat. He had this way of making everything sound so reasonable, so justified. "Rebecca gets it," he said, and I felt the blood drain from my face. "She actually listens when I talk. She makes me feel like I matter." Rebecca, his coworker, the woman I'd asked about months ago when I noticed how often her name came up, the woman he'd laughed about saying I was being paranoid and insecure, the woman he'd been sleeping with for God knows how long. "So this is my fault?" The words came out as barely a whisper. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch gentle but his eyes calculating. "I'm not saying it's your fault, babe. I'm just saying, relationships are complicated. When someone feels neglected, they look for connection elsewhere. It's human nature." The casual way he said it made my stomach turn. Like cheating was just a natural consequence of my inadequacy as a girlfriend. Like I had somehow forced his hand by not being perfect enough. "I never meant for it to happen," he continued, his thumb tracing circles on my knuckles. "But Rebecca was there when you weren't. She made me feel appreciated, desired. Can you really blame me for that?" I stared down at our joined hands, remembering all the times I'd reached for him only to be brushed off because he was tired or stressed or watching a game. All the nights I'd tried to talk about our relationship only to be told I was overthinking things. But somehow, in his version of events, I was the distant one. I was the problem. "The worst part," he said, leaning closer, "is that I still love you. I want to make this work, Lily. But you have to meet me halfway. You have to change." Change. As if I hadn't been bending myself into impossible shapes trying to be what he wanted. As if I hadn't already lost pieces of myself trying to fit his idea of the perfect girlfriend. Other couples laughed and shared desserts while I sat there drowning in the realization that the man I'd planned a future with had just spent 20 minutes explaining why his affair was actually a service to our relationship. "You're not even fighting for us," he said, pulling his hand away when I didn't respond immediately. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You just shut down." But I wasn't shutting down. I was replaying every conversation, every argument. Every time he'd made me feel small and grateful for crumbs of his affection. I was starting to see the pattern, how he'd conditioned me to doubt myself, to blame myself, to apologize for things that weren't my fault. All I could think was how easily he twisted everything, how smoothly he'd taken his betrayal and wrapped it in my supposed failures, how he'd made cheating sound like therapy, like he'd done it for the good of our relationship. And the most terrifying part? A voice in my head was actually considering it, actually wondering if maybe I had been too distant, too demanding, too much work. Maybe this really was my fault. Full story on my channel below.